I know a lot of y'all are looking at this being like, Khaki, I subscribed to your channel because I have too many foundations. This is a conversation that I've had a lot lately. People come to me and they ask a series of questions about buying a foundation or a concealer or an eyeshadow or a blush or what have you, and they want my expertise on it. They want my experience. They want my color theory eye and things like that. And when those kinds of conversations happen often enough, I'm like, I should make a video about that. So this is the total beginner's guide to buying foundation. We're going to do all of the different makeup items if y'all want, but even if you're not new here or you already own a lot of foundations, I don't know, maybe you can help contribute to the conversation in the comments. I will probably forget some things. There are exceptions to things. There are individual experiences that are going to be really valuable to share. So if you do have those kinds of experiences that you'd like to share, please feel free to do so in the comments. I'm sure that they'll be helpful to other people. So let's go ahead and jump in, y'all. I chopped all my nails off. I feel limitless. So I should start by saying, for all those out there who are like terrified of the color theory portion of this, or I don't know, you don't want to know about foundations, you want to know about blush colors or eyeshadow colors or whatever, I have an entire color theory curriculum playlist that's everything from how to find your undertone to, again, like the best colors for your skin tone. All of those are really cool, I think, fundamentals to sort of enrich your makeup using experience, but we are cracking into the basics today. We are starting at the very beginning. We're going to talk about skin level first. Now I'm going to talk about this mainly from a shopping standpoint because that's what we're going to be doing, right? We're going to be technically like buying a foundation. The first thing to understand is that brands have different opinions on how to talk about this stuff. And so it's important to know sort of how they translate to one another loosely because there are no hard and fast rules that are like enforced across brands. A lot of times they are pretty loosey-goosey, but the way that this is usually talked about is that like skin tones, if we're going from like, we'll just go light to deep in this case, but a lot of brands go deep to light as well. But most shade ranges will see a breakdown something like very fair, fair, fair light, light, light medium, medium, sometimes they'll say tan, medium dark, dark, dark deep, deep, deep rich, rich. So I've made a chart here. I did kind of the best I could to delineate these things. Understand that this is in an ideal world and a lot of shade ranges are not this exhaustive. Sometimes there are other words for these things, but like that's sort of how it's commonly understood, the same way that there are like delineations around like curl patterns and stuff like that. You know, there has to be some sort of common language around this. But like I said, brands are gonna call them all sorts of things. They're gonna have like L1 and W2 and NW3 and like NC15 sometimes, or porcelain, cocoa, alabaster, marshmallow. They love to call us foods, they love to call us wood, they love to call us stones. But it's important to know where you exist on this spectrum as a general rule because hopefully, ideally, brands are going to have like a description underneath their shade name that says like medium warm, right? Or, you know, deep olive or something like that. Like there's going to be, we're going to get to undertone here in a second, but right now we're just talking about like where your skin tone exists on that lightness to depth, depth to lightness scale. This is a pretty easy thing to figure out, especially if you're swatching. Regardless of whether you have a keen eye for color theory, you can usually tell if something is too light or too dark. So the next thing that you're going to see in a shade name usually is some kind of indication of undertone. And a lot of people just, their brains freeze up when they hear undertone because there are so many takes on this. Here's my personal take. Undertone is a color, okay? It is not a temperature. It is not some kind of oversimplified thing. And if you are lost on this, I have a whole video on how to find your undertone once and for all. And I also have this interactive color wheel for people for whom things tend to kind of like pull a different color on their skin than they appeared in the pan. From like a color cosmetics standpoint, that will often help steer you in the right direction in terms of what your undertone is. And it is usually the people who have what I call kind of, you know, difficult undertones, polar undertones, meaning they exist on the sort of like yellow green to like blue-red side of the color wheel. Those are gonna be the more difficult undertones just because color cosmetics tend to do something different on your skin, like change to a different color than they are in the pan if you have one of those undertones. And that is because the basis of all skin tones is kind of yellow and red together, some form of orange, either, you know, very light or very deep. And so the closer you are to neutral, which is yellow-orange, the more likely makeup is to behave like it looks in the pan on your skin. But if you're over here on that other difficult side of the color wheel, the makeup that has been designed to work on neutral skin is now doing something entirely different because it's mixing with a color that has like a pretty strong opinion, you know, like green and blue and purple, they have strong opinions, okay? Let's just call it that. So if you have ever found that foundations tend to turn orange on you, like all the way across the board, not just, you know, drugstore, old school CoverGirl, because that stuff oxidizes on everybody. There are certain foundations that are just bad and they oxidize on everyone. But if you find that things tend to turn like bright yellow, Cheese Whiz yellow orange, or bright orange on you, or like a really, really strong peach, it's probably because you have like a green or a blue or a purple undertone. So go watch that video. It will really break it down in a much easier way. We can't do it all right now here, which is why I have the curriculum playlist. But again, when we're looking at a shade name in a foundation line, we are usually, if it's like a number and a letter, we're talking about your skin level, right? The depth or the light of your skin, and then the undertone. Something to watch out for. Some lines follow this like other way of doing things where N doesn't mean neutral, it means needs, which is stupid in my opinion, but like NW will mean needs warm. Really bugs me because I don't think skin needs to be corrected. I don't think that because your skin is cool that it needs warmth so that it can become neutral because neutral is some kind of ideal. Nay, nay, nay. We need our complexion products to match our skin. Period, end of story. But I know that MAC was notorious for doing this, and the foundation from House Labs does as well. And so I just wanted to give any new people a heads up on that because I find it to be infuriatingly confusing, especially for new people, because it is essentially adhering to a format that has already been understood to mean something else, but they're just using it backwards. And it can be very, very frustrating, especially because warm and cool, which I'm about to talk about, don't have inherent meanings from the standpoint of undertones. It's not just a categorization of cool and warm because that doesn't give us enough information to like actually get a good match for you. So be aware of that. Unfortunately, most brands want to throw you into temperature buckets, okay? So if what I just said a minute ago about the color of your undertone made sense to you, you can probably already suss out why just simplifying it down to temperature doesn't really make sense, because where is red? Red is pink, but red is also red. So is red warm or is it cool? When we're talking about coolness, are we talking about blue? No, we're often talking about pink. Like a lot of brands think that cool means pink. And so if you're like, I have a blue undertone, I have a cool undertone, and you go and you buy something off the shelf that says that it's your level of skin and cool, it's probably going to be too pink on you because you don't have a pink undertone, you have a blue undertone. And so that's why temperature can be really, really confusing and really frustrating, and also why so many shade ranges are incredibly incomplete. I know that I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of people because, again, if you've got one of those more difficult, uncommonly catered to skin tones, you know the plight of foundation ranges coming out and going, yeah, they just don't have a shade for me. You know what I mean? I have friends who have like blue undertones or teal undertones, and I have watched so many foundation lines just not have anything for them. Olives, for the longest time, were not catered to, and they are still misunderstood. So, in the grand scheme of things, okay, and don't shoot the messenger here, warm usually, like if it's a, you know, a 6W, right? You're saying warm. The W for warm tends to mean yellow or orange. And if it's something like warm olive, they're talking about a yellow green. If they're talking about a cool olive, they're talking about a blue green. Warm usually means that it's kind of a little more orange on the orange side of neutral. Neutral means that there's a balance of yellow and red, right? And so things, like I said, tend to behave really predictably on the skin from a color cosmetic standpoint. And neutral is often still like very oversaturated towards like one undertone. In foundation lines, depending on like the lightness and the depth, I've seen all kinds of nonsense assigned to neutral undertones. This is really bad form. But a true neutral, when you're looking at a range altogether, will look kind of absent of undertone among everything else. There will be things that look more yellow, more green, more blue, more red, whatever. The neutral is going to look hopefully neutral. And if that was hard to follow from the neutral standpoint, worry not, we are pretty much the easiest one to like find in any shade range, any depth, whatever. Neutral is usually where they begin. And so if it's a decent shade range, neutral is going to be pretty evident when you put it on your skin. You're gonna be like, I'm neutral. You know? Or again, if you're using blushes and like, you know, the blush looks peach in the pan and it goes on your skin and it's peach on your skin, you probably have a neutral undertone. There are cool and warm neutral undertones, but still, you're not on the most difficult end of the spectrum in terms of skin tone matching. Let's put it that way. I mean, I'm speaking as a neutral myself. Cool, again, it could mean blue. It could mean purple. Sometimes it means green or bluish green. And often it means pink. And that is why I very much object to using temperature as a definition of an undertone. I will say something is cooler than something or warmer than something, but I do feel like it's very confusing from the standpoint of shade ranges, just because cool, I don't think that pink is necessarily by definition cool. And then we have olive, right? Olive is by definition green, but again, you can have a yellow green or a blue green or just like a green green. And the flavor of the week currently I'm finding online, just, you know, in the part of my feed that talks about color theory, is that a lot of people, a lot of experts want to like gaslight people about having olive undertones. They're like, it's not an undertone, it's an overtone. Shut up, who cares? There's no actual green pigment in your skin. Shut up, who cares? There's no actual green pigment in the foundation. Shut up, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter if your eye detects green, the skin is green, okay? And if the makeup matches your skin, who cares whether they used a green pigment to get there? It matches your skin. The reason that they all say that is because they're all trying to kind of like capitalize on all of this interest around olive skin tones right now. And so they're like, I'm a thought leader on this. You come give me your money. But like, what it really is just that desaturation, which is adding gray, right? There's no such thing really as a completely perfect neutral gray out there in the world. You know, everything is subject to light, right? And so it may be in the light spectrum, there's, you know, theoretically pure darkness or something like that, but there's no gray that is always gray in every single light source and it's always the same undertone of gray kind of thing. And so as you're adding gray to something, it can appear blue. Gray is often a desaturated blue. I have done color mixing from the standpoint of color cosmetics. I have never made my own foundation before, but I have made my own blushes and lip glosses. And a lot of times when you think that you need black, you actually use blue. And also vice versa, but blue can be so much gentler in terms of desaturation, whereas black can really overwhelm a formula really quickly. Like depending on what kind of black pigment that you're using. So it could be black, it could be blue, it could be a really, 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 really deep green for all you know. But as that's being added into a formula and it mixes with a base of any skin tone, which again is a version of orange, you're gonna get a little bit of green if that's added in there. So olive undertoned foundations and concealers often have just like a blue or a gray added to them that makes them appear green so that it matches the green in your skin. Okay, so that's what all that technicality is about. Ignore it. Like ignore it. Ignore people gaslighting you about your skin undertone, okay? Don't let anybody tell you like, oh, you're not this, it's actually this, oh, that's only this, this, and that. Who cares? It's what it looks like to your eye and whether the formula in the bottle matches your skin. Everybody else shut up. Like, I don't care. Now, there's one thing that's worth understanding about your skin and your undertone as it pertains to how you go about choosing a line specifically to buy a foundation from, because like as a fair light neutral, I have a pretty desaturated version of a neutral undertone. So like my skin's thin. And so when you look at it without makeup on, a lot of times you see, you know, the veins and stuff underneath it, and it does sort of have a cast of gray to it when I'm not wearing, you know, coverage and color on my cheeks, you know, to make me look healthy. So that's gonna need to be matched with something that looks pretty like desaturated in the tube, right? There's like a lot of white and gray in there. And that makes it so that even though it might be the same undertone and the same lightness as my skin, some concealers are still going to be too saturated, like too built up with that color with not enough gray. That doesn't mean that that shade is wrong, okay? That just means that it is not your saturation level. It could still be your undertone. It could still be your skin tone level, lightness or depth. It just isn't your chroma. Chroma is just the fancy word that we use to talk about saturation. It just means how much gray is in something. My friend Natalie has a very interesting skin tone, but often it is neutrals that end up matching her, but the neutral has to be saturated. She just has like, I don't know, more natural pigment to her pale skin in a way. I mean, it's just basically saying that it's thicker, right? It's purer in its color. And so when you're looking at shade ranges, a lot of times you're looking at them and you're like, wow, those really fair colors look like ice cream shades, you know? Like that doesn't seem like it's gonna match anybody's skin, or at least that's how I feel. There are people who need that. So don't be discouraged about your actual undertone if something just like at your level turns either a really saturated version or a really like gray version of whatever that color is. It just means you're probably in the wrong line, right? And we don't really have a lot of control over that, but there are certain lines that have more saturation, like the Merit, the Uniform. I'm not a huge fan of that formula, but in the light shades of the Merit skin tint, I have noticed that they are just very extreme versions of the undertones. And actually you'll notice that when you're looking at like Natasha Denona's skin tone range of her concealers, they are very extreme, but she has desaturated neutrals and saturated neutrals. That's a really good one to look at, as well as something like the Dior Backstage Face and Body foundation. Like that's going to have a really good range of like saturated and desaturated undertones of like pretty much everything. So I'm not saying it's the formula for everyone. I'm not saying it's the shade range for everyone. It's just a really good one if you can kind of like look at them all, like swatched on someone's arm online or something, to be able to kind of observe the nuances and the undertones and be like, ah, like train your eye for what you're looking for. Often it is easiest to see these nuances when they're next to each other, and it's easiest to observe them when something has a lot of very small incremental steps in the shade range, so large shade ranges. I also find that Tom Ford's foundations tend to have really, really fantastic examples of skin undertones in them. Like they will have a blue and a green and like a desaturated yellow, you know, like you'll be able to see them really, really strongly. And what will happen a lot of times is that, especially in a concealer where you can kind of fudge it a little bit, we can get away with wearing more than one shade, which is kind of, I mean, that's the ideal, right? Is that a shade range is so good that you can fudge it a little bit because they're all so incrementally stepped apart, but that's not normal. Now I should say there are lines that just use numbers, okay? And it can be after I said all that stuff, Hourglass is like, you wear shade 7. You're like, what do you mean 7? Where's the undertone? And again, it's just basically a title, right? It's just naming them so that you know what you wear, but you do need to go and look for like the shade description because it's gonna tell you like, oh, this is actually fair, warm, or whatever. So hopefully that helps you navigate that more easily. Okay, so now you know your skin tone because we know your level and your undertone. And we also know all of the crazy tricks that all these brands are trying to play on us by, you know, changing all the names and everything like that. We have a system, okay? And we know what they're trying to do. The next thing, because you can't just go in there with that, right? There's still a wide world. We need to narrow it down. The next thing is to understand your skin type. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what our skin type is because we've been living in it this whole time. It's something that doesn't really allow you to ignore it most of the time. It's like, oh, that's oily. Oh, that's dry. You know, that's both. So we have like very dry skin. You can see those as like delineations or not delineations. Then you have normal And then you have combo, which is like you get oily in like your T-zone and like your chin and stuff, more like hormonal areas. And then you'll get dry elsewhere. And then there's oily. And then in some cases there's like very oily. And you would like to think that when they say who it's for, because that is a thing on a lot of makeup websites, they're like, who this is for, what skin types this is for. They would be very specific about it and then you could just go by that, but makeup companies want money, and so they're gonna be real vague about it. They don't want anybody to give a really stinky review, but they're going to try and squeeze in as many skin types as they can in terms of who it's for, because they don't want to exclude anyone unnecessarily. They would like to have your money. Thank you very much. So a lot of times you will see like all the skin is for everybody. This is for everybody. Tick, 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 just all the boxes. And you're just like, well, that can't be true. It really can't be true. I mean, there are things that work for a lot of people, but for people on like a really extreme end of the spectrum, very dry or very oily, the same thing isn't going to work for those two people, right? So let's go through and translate what like the finish is, and we will get to finish, like your desired finish, but what the finishes of the foundations actually mean in terms of your skin type and who something is for. So when you see that something is radiant, and that can mean a lot of things. Recently, it has come to mean that there is actual mica or synthetic fluoroflogopite in a formula, which means that it is going to actually be like pearlescent and reflective on the skin. That's not for everybody. So if that's not for you, then definitely check the ingredients list, because mica is gonna be right there, or synthetic fluoroflogopite is gonna be right there, or pearlized something, you know? And that will give you a clue that like, oh, this isn't just meant to look like skin, this is also meant to make me look like a mermaid. I mean, sometimes they're really subtle, but sometimes mica is the first ingredient and you're like, uh-oh, you know? Uh-oh, mica's not my skin tone. Radiant can mean iridescent, or it can also mean dewy. Again, check the ingredients. If it doesn't have any of the shiny stuff, then they usually just mean dewy, but it is a word that tends to just kind of get flopped around willy-nilly. Then we have like dewy, glowy, luminous, hydrated, moisturized. Like that's gonna be like a sheen, right? It's gonna give a sheen to the skin. It's going to probably not have much of a dry down, but a lot of times you will find like a foundation that will dry down, and I call it like a glycerin finish. That just means that like when it dries really like smooth, almost to the point that it's shiny. And I love when things do that. Like the Danessa Myricks skin tint does that, where you're just like, ooh, it's self-leveling. We love that. But as a general rule, if it says that it's dewy, if it says that it's hydrated, if it says that it is luminous, it's gonna be kind to dry skin, because your dry skin is looking for that moisture. Now, it always is going to come into the conversation that like foundation shouldn't have to carry all of the weight of every single thing that you need on your skin that day, like that you need your skin to do that day. Enter skin prep, right? You know, your sunscreen, your moisturizer. Some folks prefer to use a primer to achieve something different out of their foundation. And I'm a huge fan of using a setting mist to change the appearance of something without necessarily changing who the formula is for from a skin type standpoint. I know we're getting into the weeds between finish and skin type. They are not the same thing, but we often don't get as many clues as to the skin type that something is for, other than trying to interpret the finish claim. So we'll get into all that with finish here in a second, but natural. When they say that it's a natural finish, that to me is the biggest catch-all, right? That is the word that they love to use for everything. They're just like, what is it? Natural finish. And it sort of allows them to say like, it's for you and you and you, everybody gets a natural finish. Who doesn't want a natural finish? You want it to look like your skin. Skin is natural, it's a natural finish. And so they just kind of throw everything in that bucket. It can mean a little bit dewier. It can mean a little bit more satin matte. It usually means kind of right there in the middle though. And so it's good for combo. It's actually good for a lot of skin types. It actually is, but it's like not usually the greatest for like the most polar end. It's not usually the most oil controlling formula in and of itself, but it's also not the most hydrating formula in and of itself. It's just kind of right there in the middle. Satin. Satin is gonna start to get into an oil controlling skin type audience, but it doesn't yet have the powder finish that a matte does. And so it will have a little bit of, you know, something to like absorb oil and stay long wearing. And a lot of times they will be fuller coverage. You don't usually come across like a satin finish that's like low coverage. It'll be at least like medium, but satin is usually right there next to natural finish in the sense that it's going to dry in this sort of like the other side of satin, not the shiny side of satin, but the other side, you know, where it's smooth, but it's not reflecting light. Satin is good for photographing and things like that because it's going to absorb a little bit more light and it's going to look more natural, like under camera lights and things like that. And then matte. Matte is for people who need oil control. You can have a matte finish on your makeup if you don't have oily skin, but you don't need to buy a matte foundation to do that, okay? Now, some of them lately have just been wrong, okay? They've said that they're matte and they're not. The Prada, it says that it's matte and it's not. This new Hermes, it says that it's matte and it's not. So there are some out here that are just doing it wrong. It's just a crapshoot, and that's why we have reviews. Definitely like read reviews, especially if something's been around for a long time, or, you know, look for reviews on YouTube. That's why people like me exist. But as a general rule, when we're talking about a matte foundation, we're usually talking about something that is for people who do need oil control and it's going to look natural on them because the matteness is going to balance out with their naturally oily skin, and it's just gonna kind of be like a long wearing version of what it is that they're trying to achieve. Now, does that mean that you have to wear a matte oil controlling foundation if you have oily skin? No. So let's talk about finish, shall we? Because I am blending the two together as I speak. So your skin is your starting point. The finish is the finish, okay? And so when they talk about the finish claim on the actual foundation, you're on the website, it's like finish, blah. They're talking about how it would look on normal skin. Okay, so I made a diagram, and the diagram basically shows how each skin type will react by the different claims on the finish and what finish you're actually going to get out of it. So like a matte finish on dry skin is gonna look bananas. It's gonna crack up on you and be nuts. A dewy one is going to look probably pretty natural. A dewy foundation on an oily complexion, plenty of people do it. Some people like their skin to look really dewy, okay? Just lean into it kind of thing. I will say, there are more options in that respect for people who want their skin to look dewier, like embrace the oil. For people over here like me on the very, very dry end of the spectrum, I don't recommend using a matte, I already said that, but I don't recommend using a matte foundation, period. Doesn't mean you can't wear a matte finish. You can get a matte finish out of a natural finish or something like that by using a matte setting spray and also just by using powder. That's the whole thing with matte foundations, is that they have powders in them. If you really want to mattify, you can just put powder on. They make that. And for people who have trouble with oil control and they want long wearingness, but they also would like it to look a little more sheeny, there are dewy setting mists. There are really beautiful serum blushes that are going to give that glycerin finish but also dry down, and so they don't interrupt the wear time like a, an actual gel balm blush might. So when you are choosing a foundation, you have to sort of start again at your skin type, figure out the finish that you want, and then find out kind of like where you need to compensate in terms of the claim in order to get there. Now, I should also mention that there is this thing called powder foundation. A lot of y'all were like, where's my powder foundation? There are so many powder foundation. There's so many types of powder foundation, okay? Most of them are very oil controlling and are for people for whom oil control is necessary. Like, we have taken the liquid out, we have put the powder in because the face is providing all the liquid we need. But there are also very finely milled powder foundations like the Laura Geller that my mother loves to wear, because as we age and we get creases in our skin, liquid foundations, a lot of them, start to really just pool in all the lines. And so a really lightweight powder can be a way better texture that, you know, hugs the contours of your face without completely accentuating every single nuance. So there are things out there like that, like you'll see mineral powders, mineral powder foundations and stuff like that. Usually those are meant to put a very light coating on the skin that doesn't have a ton of oil control. It just has a little bit of coverage and sort of naturally clings to the skin. But then there's also like, you know, a MAC Studio Fix. And you could use that to like erase the features off of your face if you wanted to. Like, it's wild stuff. MAC makes things for all of the extremes. I respect that. But I used to use that stuff in college because I had such bad acne and I picked at it really badly. And so it was just like, you know, get rid of it. But yeah, I think that there was an era where it was understood that we were all supposed to be wearing like powder foundation, and like, I gotta say, most of the population does not benefit from a powder foundation, okay? Not nearly as many people as they wanted us to believe in the 90s benefit from a powder foundation. We've talked about things that are kind of like musts to understand because they're things that your skin does. And then there are things that are like your preference, right? So it's like your skin type is something that your skin does, but the finish is like, what do you want out of it? And now we have another one that's like, what do you want out of it? And that is coverage level, okay? And coverage level is a really big deal. It's a big deal. I'm gonna get into all the reasons why. I'm gonna try and pace myself. The first one is because the more coverage you put on, as a general rule, all of these things have exceptions, but the more coverage you put on, the more work you're kind of signing up for, because you kind of got to draw your face back on. It just flattens everything, right? Our faces have natural color to them for the most part. So it's like, I'd want a contour, I'd want a bronze, I'd want a blush, I'd want an eyeshadow, I'd want an eyeliner, I'd want a mascara, I'd want a lipstick, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you go for less coverage, you're automatically signing up for like, I'm leaving some of my face there so that I don't have to draw it on later. So that's just kind of like it's like a wager that you're calculating in the morning or when you're buying your foundation. We're like, how much work do I want to sign up for? Because you can always conceal with a concealer. You don't have to cover your whole face in makeup just because you have blemishes or discoloration or whatever. You don't have to. You don't have to wear makeup. You know what I mean? I'm not the boss of you. I'm not your real dad. But as a general rule, it follows a spectrum, right? You've got sheer. And sheer is gonna be sheer. There's stuff out there where you're like, did it do anything? There's like the, you know, Chantecaille cushion. I don't know if that thing still exists, but also there's like the Glossier skin tint. Like, it's just so barely there. It's crazy. Then we have like light coverage. I would consider anything that's like a skin tint. Tinted moisturizer, most of those things, tinted serums, what are the other words? Tinted SPFs. Most of those are gonna be low coverage. Not all of them, especially if it's like an SPF 50. I know. It doesn't need to form a physical barrier, but still. I've had a lot of experience with these things. If it has a physical SPF in it, it probably is going to have a little bit more visible coverage. But it's also important to understand the differences between those kinds of formulas, because like a tinted moisturizer is going to be more hydrating, whereas a skin tint, not necessarily. A tinted oil is going to be a tinted oil. They don't really make those as much anymore. They have moved on to these really beautiful, super thin skin tints that work for a lot more skin types and are a lot longer wearing, but have a very similar appearance, like the Lisa Eldridge. But you are going to come across ones like the Danessa Myricks that does have a little bit more coverage. It does actually dry down for the most part, but it keeps a dewy finish on it. And that's why there are so many out there. It's just because it's like, even inside of a certain definition, like, you know, oh, a tinted moisturizer or a tinted SPF or a skin tint or whatever, there are still going to be like variations in coverage levels. Just as a general rule, they're pretty like low to medium coverage. Then you have medium coverage. This, I feel like, is when we get into like true foundations, out of the skin tint area and into a foundation. So you should expect from these things for it to have more performance. I think we should all want and demand performance, the more coverage that there is, right? So you're getting into medium coverage, you're talking like, you know, the new makeup by Mario or the new Hermes. Like, it's going to obscure things, it's going to perfect things, but it's still gonna let your skin show through. I love a medium coverage foundation. They really perform. And honestly, I would argue that some of the skin tints that are really high performing are interchangeable in my mind with those things. It's just like, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times skin tints will have more hydration to them. They'll be more dry skin friendly than, you know, the typical medium coverage foundation. So a medium coverage foundation, I would say, tops out at like a 40 to 50% coverage level. Like the new makeup by Mario does not build Like, it's gonna stay the same coverage level no matter what. It has its nice spot that it likes to be in, and that's the coverage level that it is. But there are medium to buildable foundations. There are a lot of those out there, and when you find one that builds, it can be kind of, it's just kind of fantastic, right? Because it's nice to have those options when you find one that stretches and doesn't get all weird, you know, when you sort of try and use very little of it, and it also builds on itself and you can get more coverage out of it. But that's gonna get you, like, by definition, 50 to 75% coverage and kind of top out there. You're still not going to end up not being able to see like the nuances of like the contours of your face or your freckles or things like that. And then you have full coverage, and full coverage is like, you know, pretty much full coverage, you know? It's like gonna basically shellac everything. It's not the most common thing in the world. It's pretty hard to find something that is like full coverage. Like, you gotta really be looking for it, and even sometimes when they say that they're full coverage, they're not. I've probably only encountered maybe like 5 or 6 truly full coverage foundations in my whole career. And they can be different finishes, absolutely. They do tend to be more matte just because it is a more long wearing type of formula. And also full coverage tends to photograph better. And so a lot of times they will be matte because matte also tends to photograph better. But that's when we're talking about like getting to 100% coverage. I do not currently own anything that goes up to 100% coverage. Maybe a concealer, maybe. I have yet to apply all of my concealers to my entire face. I know that surprises everyone, but yeah, I don't think that I own a foundation. That I'm very much a medium buildable kind of girly. I love something that obscures everything, smooths everything, perfects everything, but I keep my freckles, and I can do any of the heavy lifting in terms of coverage with a higher coverage concealer. Now, all of those are kind of general rules. You can have a sheer matte foundation. You can have a full coverage dewy foundation. These things do exist. It is not a hard and fast rule that like anything that's full coverage is gonna be matte, or anything that is sheer is going to be dewy. But again, when we're talking about what you want to achieve from something, you're gonna wanna take into consideration your skin type, because if you are dry skinned and you want something dewy, you're gonna need to go for something really dewy, or dewy and also a dewy setting mist. You know, if you have an oily skin type and you want something that is like not going to budge at all, you're gonna need to build in the scaffolding, okay? I mean, Jackie Aina has been known to put on primer and then powder and then matte foundation on top of that, because she does not want it to move, but she also has oily skin. So if you know, you know. And so you need to take your particular skin's preferences into consideration when we're talking about both finish and coverage level. One last note here before we move on to some just general pointers and kind of like how to go about the practical shopping experience. I just want to make a note about contrast. I am a big fan of talking about contrast. I think understanding contrast in the way that you do your makeup is so helpful. It's not about right and wrong. It's about understanding what you're trying to achieve and what you're looking at and how to close that gap to make your makeup do what you want it to do. And so I made a whole video on it. Actually, I have like 3 videos on it because I think it's that important. And contrast is something that can be altered visually even when you don't necessarily realize that that's what you're doing, because anything with a harsh line or a hard line or a graphic line, harsh sounds negative. Anything with a graphic line, a strong delineation between 2 colors that are different from each other, is going to make something appear higher contrast. If you have white over here and black over here and they sort of blend together right here, it's not going to look like that black and that white are as high contrast from each other. But if they're just sitting next to each other with a line in the center, you're going to go, whoa, that's a lot of contrast, that pops. So a full coverage foundation is going to look higher contrast. Someone like me, I am medium contrast, contrast being the kind of difference between like the darkest part of your features and the lightest part of your features, right? Your hair versus the lightest part of your skin, or like your eyes kind of thing. I'm not used to seeing myself in high contrast. So if I put on a full coverage foundation, even if I paint everything back onto perfection, I'm still gonna be missing my freckles. I'm still gonna be missing my pigmentation a little bit, just visually, because I am not used to seeing myself high contrast. And so if you want to play within your natural contrast level, which is the easiest thing to do, right? It's not necessarily like a must. You don't have to. That's one of the biggest things I have an issue with in like the TikTok takes of contrast is they're like, this is your contrast, you've been diagnosed, now this is the way you wear your makeup or else you look bad, you know? And I'm like, no, like stop analyzing celebrities. She's in her color story, she's out of her color story. Look how ugly she is, shut up. No, it's just easiest to work most closely with what is already naturally occurring on your skin. If you have really bright skin, like you don't have any like freckles or anything like that, then like, you know, a full coverage foundation is probably not gonna look that weird on you, right? You're just gonna be like, look like I always look, right? And for me, a low coverage foundation that shows my skin through it or something medium coverage, I feel pretty comfortable with that because it still looks like me. And it also, anything that kind of has more mixture of color visibly, right? So it's like, you know, my freckles in combination with my blush in combination with my actual skin color showing through underneath my eyes and stuff like that. That's going to, it's like a melange, right? It's like that gray mixed together. That's going to always appear lower contrast. Kind of like curly hair looks lower contrast. So if you have curly hair and then you throw on a full coverage foundation, you might be like, whoa. And so sometimes when those things disagree, it can be a little bit unfamiliar looking to us. We'll be like, why does it look like that? So it can be helpful, especially if you're trying to do as little work as possible. You're trying to set yourself up for an easy makeup routine, to watch my contrast video, think about what your contrast actually is, your natural contrast, and I do have a video on how to like diagnose that. And then think about the coverage level that is going to make you look the most like you, depending on how like much brightness you have to your skin, how high contrast you are against your features, or how low contrast you are against your features. If you're like a redhead with tan skin and a ton of freckles, you are low contrast, you know? Putting on a full coverage foundation is gonna make a lot of work for you. Like if you're very pale, freckled, blue-eyed, curly, blonde hair, you're going to be making a lot of work for yourself by putting on a full coverage foundation. So hopefully that helps it make sense. And if you're like, I have bad skin, you can still wear something that is low coverage and then use concealer to obscure those things. No one's telling you that you have to like go out with your acne, you know, loud and proud. I don't want to either. Okay, so a few things to keep in mind, a little bit of like, you know, reminders here. Skin prep, primers, setting mists are all at your disposal to change the way something is on a daily basis because our skin isn't always the same, right? Some people, especially seasonally, like dry skin, can become very dry skin. That doesn't mean you have to go and buy a new foundation. Oily skin can become very oily. You can move in the skin type scale one direction or the other depending on where you are, maybe traveling to, the weather. You don't need to buy a new foundation for every single one of those things. You can use other things to adjust for like the dryness or the oiliness that you need. Also, when you're choosing a foundation, think about the other kinds of products that you might be wanting to use. Are you more comfortable using powders or creams? Because creams are more likely to disturb what's underneath. That's not always the case, but a lot of times, you know, if we're applying it with a brush or something and we want to buff it on, it's probably going to like move a foundation around. So you probably want to go with something that wears in instead of wearing off. So like a dewier or lower coverage foundation. If you are going to be working with a lot of powders, a really dewy foundation is going to soak up a powder and it's going to kind of grab it and make it go on unevenly. It's going to wet your brush and that moisture is going to get back into the pan. It's going to hard pan your powder products, which is not the end of the world, but it's pretty frustrating sometimes. You can just use Scotch tape to get it out. But if you keep doing it, it's just going to keep getting worse. So it's important to bear those kinds of things in mind, and also that you can layer things. So it's like if you're wearing a semi-matte satin foundation or something like that and you use powders on top, you can then go in with a dewy blush or a dewy highlighter or something on top and bring the skin texture back to the parts of your face that you want to be dewy, and it's going to make everything look, you know, healthier by association. You don't have to be like trapped by the finish of your foundation. There also exist these lovely things called color correctors, okay? And they are the saving grace of people who have difficult undertones, difficult to match, not difficult. I'm not telling you your skin tone's difficult, although it kind of is. It kind of is. I don't think that anybody really minds saying, it's kind of like empathizing with you, like, haven't you been through enough? Yeah, you have difficult undertones, okay? You got a blue or a green or a purple undertone, that's kind of difficult. So a lot of people find a green color corrector mixed in with a neutral foundation to be extremely helpful, or a blue color corrector or a purple color corrector, and they make those, you know? They make them for the people just like you, because there are a lot of foundation ranges out there that just don't cater to you. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it sucks. It just kind of is what it is. And then there's always the option of using like bronzing drops to deepen a foundation if you're really pale but you get a little bit of a tan, or if you buy a foundation that's a little bit too light for you. But I wouldn't rely on that. I have been through it a lot, and I will say that like bronzing drops probably can only be relied upon to deepen a foundation by like maybe a shade. Usually it's about half a shade, because it's not usually adhering to your undertone very well. It's usually going to like warm up a formula, warm up a color. And so you do have to use it kind of sparingly, and it can make things just kind of behave strangely. So even a bronzing drop has an undertone to it that's going to influence what you mix it with. Like, they're definitely not all the same color. So I want to close by walking us through a little exercise of being in the store. I want y'all, first of all, to develop a game plan. Don't go in, I mean, we've all seen it, right? At the grocery store, it's like, I'll remember my list. And then you walk in and you're like, I'm a hungry monster. Or you like think, I know what I'm going to talk to my doctor about. And then they call it white coat syndrome. They walk in, they're like, so what's going on? You're like, nothing, I'm fine. And they're like, okay. You're like, okay. And then you go home still feeling terrible. Like, let's not do that. Let's go in with a game plan. Even if you got to like put it in the notes app on your phone, write it down, whatever. I have blank level of skin depth. I have blank undertones, right? I have blank skin type. You're filling in all these blanks if that wasn't obvious. I want blank coverage, I want blank wear time, and I want blank finish, okay? And work through those things and kind of understand, like, if your answer is in any way like extreme in terms of skin type, that the finish that you're trying to achieve might need to be compensated for a little bit in the actual claim on the formula. Because again, all of this stuff is described for like how it behaves on normal skin. If you don't have normal skin, then you do have to kind of think about like the dewiness being soaked up by your dry skin, or your skin making something behave more dewily. Your skin might make it shiny if you're oily, you know? Before you go into the store, like a Sephora or an Ulta or, you know, whatever, set aside the right amount of time. Set aside enough time that you don't feel rushed. Give yourself an afternoon, and if you feel comfortable letting someone help you, let someone help you. I personally, in an exercise like this, I want to be left alone. I want to go and swatch in peace. And so when they're like, can I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? You'd be like, thank you so much. You are so nice for doing your job. I appreciate you. But like, I need to swatch in peace, because we are going to be swatching with purpose today, okay? We're going to find the thing that matches. We're going to spread them out, right, on the back of our hand so that we can see what the finish is like, what the coverage level is like. We're gonna let them dry, see if they oxidize. And I say on the back of your hand, even though your hand's not the same color as your face, okay? It's not, but that will give you an idea of the finish of them and the coverage level of them and the undertone. Your undertone is the same all over your whole body, even if your face is darker or lighter. Some people it's lighter. So you'll be able to see whether something glows yellow or pink or like gray on you or something like that. That's all still news you could use in terms of undertone. But if you're having trouble seeing your undertone, it can be helpful to swatch things that are a shade lighter or a shade darker than your skin tone, because it will make those dissonant undertones glow and it will help you be able to see it more clearly. Don't gaslight yourself. Don't look at it and think, well, if there's no shade in here for me, then my skin is wrong. I'm doing something wrong. No. There are a lot of ranges out there that do not work for a lot of people, okay? Shade ranges do not go through any kind of certification board that approves them for inclusivity, okay? There are a lot of them that are just bad. And so do not look at it and go, well, that's close enough. No, it's not. You deserve the best. It's your money, it's your face, okay? You should be stoked about your shade match and about your texture and everything that you're getting out of it. So once you've swatched it on the back of your hand and you've sort of decided like, oh, this is the formula that I'm going for and this is the undertone that I'm going for, now we're gonna start kind of swatching on our face. We went in without makeup on. We're gonna swatch on our face. But the lighting in those places is not ideal. I recommend going to like a Sephora or an Ulta that's in a strip mall because then you're gonna get natural light coming in the windows. If you go in one that's in like a regular mall, I mean, it is just a crapshoot. You can't see squat. Those lights are so weird. Like I get home and I'm like, that's not what I thought that was at all. Even from a shade matching standpoint, even me, I know I'm the best. No, I'm not, but I mean, it's like, I do have a lot of experience with this and it's like, even I will get home with the wrong shade sometimes from matching it in Sephora because the Sephora lighting is so bad. So be aware of that. Get close to natural light. You know, if you have to like, you know, swatch and then like run outside, whatever. Let them think you're crazy, okay? Mel Robbins, let them think you're insane. You're gonna buy the right shade. So obviously, you know, you wanna see if it matches your face, but you can also swatch on your neck because for a lot of us, that's where the skin doesn't have the pigmentation. We're gonna be matching skin that doesn't have freckles on it. We're matching the skin, not the freckles. I mean, the freckles are on the skin, but regardless, we're matching like the base skin tone, right? So a lot of times your neck or your chest is a much better place. If you're like me and have a lot of pigmentation, a darker foundation is gonna look like it matches my cheeks, but it's not gonna match right here when I get there because I've just got so many freckles. It makes me look almost like tanner, you know, if you don't have your glasses on. So match to that because that way you're matching to your actual skin tone. And again, let it cook, let it sit there. Decide whether it is oxidizing, decide whether it's actually the right shade, and it should blend in and you should go, oh. It shouldn't stand out in any way. It should like literally match. Ideally, it should match perfectly. Like here I have B10 from Chanel and I put that on my neck. I blend that out. And it's a pretty freaking good match. It might be a little tiny bit dark for me this time of year, but it's a freaking good match. I don't think anybody would clock that. Oh, and also know that as you're wiping it off, you're making your skin red. So that's why I say do it on your hand first and then move to your neck because you kind of gotta like be sparing with the ones that you do on your neck and your chest because it's gonna be red as you wipe them off. Or at least mine are. But like here's LN5 from, did I put it there? I'll put it here. From Prada. By God, am a light neutral. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to disappear. So don't settle. Don't let anybody talk you into buying something that's going to be different than what you're seeing with your eyes when you get home. Like, you know what I mean? Don't let anybody convince you that something's going to be magic. Believe your eyes, understand that there are limitations to every line, to every formula, to every product. There are going to be limitations and that your skin is not wrong. The foundation is wrong. And if you get it home and it sucks and you're in the US, return it. You are not a slave to that foundation, okay? You don't have to make it work. Take it back. Don't make yourself miserable. Get the perfect one. Foundation's expensive. So I hope that this has empowered you with the information that you need. Again, there are just a lot of people in my life who are even regular channel watchers who are still like, I don't know what to do. If I want to buy, I don't know what to do. So hopefully this helps and hopefully making more of these will also be helpful for other things in your routine. But I think foundation is like, I mean, it's the foundation. I need to get off camera. So if you did enjoy this, please give the video a thumbs up. If you're new here, hi, hello, my name is Kaki. Please subscribe while you're here. We'd love to have you. I will put a video up here that I think that you will enjoy if you liked this one. Thank you all so much for being here, for hanging out with me today. I love you so much. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.